Today, we're going to be working on old, distressed MDF board or particle board, basically old furniture that's not made out of real wood. And so we're going to be working on this project. I personally am going to be working on this coffee table that I found on Facebook Marketplace. It's a really old, distressed piece, and it's made out of fake wood. It's got parts that are chipped, it's got corners that are all jacked up, and so it's going to be a really fun project, and we're going to make it look really nice and pretty. For this project, you're definitely going to need more products than tools. You're only going to need for tools putty knives. And I like to suggest a putty knife that's a little bit more flexible. It really helps with working the putty into the surface that you're going to be repairing. For the products that you're going to need masking tape and masking paper. Or you can use drop cloth. That really helps with just keeping your work area nice and neat and tidy. You're going to need a good wood filler or plastic wood filler, something that's paintable and that's sandable. This stuff is really good. It's by DAP, and it hardens harder than the wood that you're actually repairing, so it's nice and firm and sturdy for when you're painting it. It's going to be a nice, long, sturdy finish. And then you're going to need some sandpaper so that once it dries, you can really smooth out and make it feel and look like a good surface that's ready to be painted, whatever you want to do with that after you're done repairing it. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to really want to do is prepare your surface to receive all of that wood filler putty. And so you're going to want to clean it, make sure that it's a good surface. And then what I do is I get my putty knife and come in close. All of the little parts that are starting to chip and they look loose on the old, whether it's paint or whether it's a laminate thing that you have that's covering your MDF or your particle board, I like to get my putty knife and just chip away at any of the parts that are still loose, and so that anything that's left on there is really solid on there, but anything that is loose is going to come off so that it doesn't tamper with the filler really sticking to your surface really well. And so I do that all over. I get all the parts that, see how that came off really easily? That means that when I put my wood filler on there, that has the potential for messing up the filler, like really setting in and sticking to the surface. So I do that all on the parts that are damaged and need repair. The next thing you want to do is take all of the little areas that you just chipped away at with your putty knife, get a little piece of sandpaper and start sanding them so that all of the edges that are maybe still a little bit jagged, you want to smooth them out with the sandpaper, but it will also leave a little bit of texture that whatever you're going to finish it with will really adhere to very well. So for me, I'm going to be doing paint after. Now that we have our surfaces nice and prepared, we want to get our putty knife and our putty, and then we're going to take a little bit of the putty. You don't want to overdo it because this stuff starts to dry up when it's out of the container. So you want to get a little bit of it and start just spreading it like you would butter on a toast or butter on a biscuit right over the areas that you want to cover. And you don't need to worry about it being too neat. You don't want to leave it like an absolute mess, but you don't need to worry about leaving it too super smooth because that's when the sanding is going to come into play. So you just want to make sure that you have actually put enough filler into each of the parts that you're trying to repair. And once you know that you've already covered all of those areas, then you can move on to another area. And that's when we take care of the smoothing with the sandpaper later. So this is what mine looks like. I want you to notice that I didn't leave too much excess, so it's going to take forever for me to sand it down to the level that I want. And I didn't put too little so that I didn't fill in all of the areas that I needed to. And I'm not worrying about it being perfect. The sandpaper really takes care of a lot of the imperfections. There's a couple of things that I need to make note of when you're doing the wood filler. If you have a surface that maybe you already have a good finish on the rest of it and you really only need to specifically patch a small spot, I would recommend putting masking tape around the area so that you don't mess up any of the other spots, so that when you're starting to sand, you can really focus on just that one little area, and then you could do all your little touch-ups with paint or with stain or whatever it is that you're doing. Another note that I wanted to make is when you are doing larger structures that you need to patch, like maybe a large chunk of a corner got smashed out, your sanding is going to be a really big friend to you. I really layered it on really thick on the edge right here, and all of that is going to, most of it actually, is going to come off with sanding, and I need to rebuild the corner structure. So don't be afraid to really lay it on thick, and once it dries off, your sanding is going to really iron out all of the imperfections. It's been a couple days, and for your cure time, you might wait a lot less than I did, but because I had some really thick corners where I applied a lot of the wood filler, I wanted to really make sure that it dried all the way through. And so 24 hours is probably sufficient for that. You can really paint it after an hour if you just did a really thin layer on yours, or you can sand it after just a couple hours if you had a really thin layer on yours, but for mine, I waited. So now we're gonna start sanding, and we're gonna really, just get it ready for whatever you're gonna do after you sand it and you have a nice finished structure. If you have a lot layered on like I do, I'm gonna start with a really thick coarse grit sandpaper, which is 80 grit, and then I'm just gonna work my way down a 150, then 220, and once it's right, nice and smooth, then I can really finish it and paint it. One final note is that sometimes the first coat that you put of the wood filler doesn't suffice. You just need to, once it dries and you sanded it, it doesn't look good yet and you need to add a little bit more. So be patient, just trust the process and add a little bit more wood filler and wait for it to dry again. Okay, so after you've sanded and smoothed every refinished surface, you just gotta get a damp rag and wipe off all of that dust, because whatever it is that you want to finish your piece with, whether it be lacquer, paint, primer, whatever it is, you don't want dust all over it. And you're done. You're ready to go. Hey, I really hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any questions for me, go ahead and ask me in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to our Honey Home channel. And if you want to see how this project went from start to finish, how we restored an 80s coffee table, look out for that video on our page. I really look forward to helping you on your next home project.